How are we doing? Fox back again for sound design tutorials. This is part 4 of our all-inclusive course for Revolution by way of Alchemy. Today we're going to be going over this the classic step sequencer part at the bottom. I'm just going to switch scenes so you can see it a little bit better. I'm going to talk about what you've got. First thing, we'll talk about this little slider here, this A and B knob. If you click on it, it changes between the first 16 and then the second 16 steps in the step sequencer. It's a 32 part or 32 step sequencer. So when it's on A, you're able to manipulate the first 16 steps. When it's on B, you're able to manipulate the second. Now there's a little chase button at the top here. When this is highlighted, when you play a sequence, if I just load a pattern in, you can see the slider bouncing backwards and forwards between the different steps. If you take the chase off, it stays on whichever one you want it to. So you can insert notes and add notes and remove notes without having to wait for it to chase between part A and B. I like to leave the chase off and just input the notes as and when I feel free in the different parts. So yeah, what can you do with this step sequencer? So it is a classic step sequencer in regards to that it's trying to emulate the ones that are on like the Roland 808 and the 909 here. You can see the buttons are very similar to what you've got on here. So how you input a sound into this is you go to the main section, click on the button that you want or click on the sound that you want. So we want the kick, and you go back to the step sequencer and it's just exactly how you think. That's the 1. The 5 is the next one, the 9 is the next one, the 13 is the next one. That's the bars. So now we're going to have a kick on the first 4 for the first 16 steps. You can hear the next 4 are missing. We need to go to B and add them in on that also. This little play button which I've done here, this plays this internal step sequencer. Click it to play, click it to stop. So if we go and bring in another element now, let's go a hi-hat. Let's input a hi-hat on every note. So we're going to get a nice continual hi-hat sequence. Go back to A, input them all again. So this is going to be 16th notes. So we press play. So now we have the option to accent sounds as well. When it's yellow, it's just not full velocity, but how it comes as standard. You have then the option to accent the sound or increase the volume per step. And the way you do that is you click it and it goes red. So if we want to create a bit of an accented shuffle, so some of them are going to be louder than the other, we can just go in, change some of these to red, and you're going to hear some fluctuations in velocity or volume for these hi-hats. Gives it more of a human feel. If we turn them off and then just bring them back in as standard, there is a global accent per step as well, which we'll talk about quickly. So if we wanted to highlight everything that comes in on a 1 step, whether it's a kick, a clap, a snare or whatever, and in fact let's introduce a snare as well. So we want the snare on the 5 and the 13. It's not coming in very snarey. Let's try and snare is very. Let's change it to the snare 1, the 5 and the 13. So you have something now that's called a global accent. Well, what that means is it's this row of buttons up here. It says, look, displays global accent for step 1, step 2, etc. So what you do, if you highlight this, it's going to accent everything on that step. So it's going to accent the snare. It's going to accent the kick because it's still highlighted there. It's also going to accent the highlight for that step. So you'll hear it. So the snare is louder on the 5 because the global accent is on compared to when it's off. Easy peasy, nice and straightforward. It's very cool for adding some extra punch to the start of each 16 maybe. Let's bring in some accent again on the hi-hats. Solo the kick. Mute the kick and the snare for now. So we've just got the hi-hats and we're going to talk about the swing aspect of it. So the swing, it pushes the last note or the third note of every bar closer towards the last note, which gives it a swingy feel. You can control that by just dialing in the amount here. So positive or negative. If you go negative, it slides it towards the second note. It's not a common sound that you hear, but if you do it the other way, that classic swing, MPC swing, Native Instruments machine. All the new drum machines have a swing feature in it, so you have got that there. This is global accent, increases the volume. So you can change the volume of the global accent as well by up to 100%, so it can be twice as loud. So if we introduce this global accent now on the 1, the 5, the 9 and the 13 for both pages, you're going to hear a drastic increase in the volume for those hits. Yeah, nice and easy peasy, straightforward. As I say, this shows you obviously which one you're modulating, A and B, A and B. You've then got some other functions about how you, let's clear this pattern, let's go to pattern 7. You've then got some other functions of how you can get the sequencer to sync with a host if you like. If you click this button, when I press space in Ableton, it's going to get the sequencer going inside this. Handy if you want it to stop and start with the play roll inside Ableton. Obviously it helps when you're recording stuff in if you've got the metronome, so I've just turned Ableton metronome on. Let's create a new pattern again. We'll talk about how we can input stuff in. So obviously it's been designed to be used with a MIDI controller, so you can input notes by recording them in, or you can push the steps in as well. Can you see these lights changing in or out? I'll just try and get rid of them. So yeah, from C1 to 16 steps up, you can input the notes. So C1 will be the first hit. So if I choose the kick again, so you can see I've pressed C1. If I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up, 9, 13. I've now inputted the kick just by pressing buttons on the controller. How hard you hit it means whether it's accented or not. If I hit it really hard, it's going to automatically come up accented. You can then take the metronome off. If we go to the hi-hat, snare, can see how easy it is to input notes that way. It's a little bit clunky for me because you're trying to work out the divisions of the steps in and amongst the sharp notes and the flat notes of the keyboard. It probably would have been easier if they'd have spread it across the white notes, but you would have needed 16 white notes and it would have took up a lot more of the keyboard bed, and there's some other features and functions that the keyboard does later on. So as well as inputting the sounds like that, if we again start a new pattern, if we go to pattern 8, you can simply just record them in. So we are synced to the host at the minute. So if I press space again, bring in the metronome, we can record stuff in with this little record button here. When the record button is enabled, we can simply record it in as if you would any other sort of drum machine. Stop the playback again, find the next sound that we want. Set the metronome off, stop playback, do a little tom roll. Stop it again, lay this clap with the snare, find another sound you want, crash, obviously once you've got the sequence going, then you can go ahead back up to the top part, change things out, add some reverb and delays to the snares. Sorry for the clipping there. As well as syncing it to the host, we create another new pattern. If the green button here is unchecked, the sequencer starts and stops with the button at the bottom. You can still record in the same, so we'll hit record. I didn't realise that. You can also input the steps by recording them in by pressing on the buttons at the top here, which is handy. So once you've got your pattern in there, you can change the rate or the speed at which it plays. So you can half time it by going 1/8. Back to the original, or double time. If you go into the library, there's all sorts of different sequences and stuff which you can load, and we'll be going over that when we go over the step sequencer in the next part. But yeah, for now, that has been the classic analog step sequencer. So dial the buttons in, dial the steps in or out just by clicking, or recording them in by pressing the buttons at the top here, or record them in by pressing C1 scale to 16 MIDI notes up. Yeah, change the swing, change whether it's chasing, record it, sync it to your host. Everything you want to do is there. In the next video, we'll be going over the actual step sequencer. Not step sequencer, this sort of MIDI grid sequencer where you can draw the steps in and out. This is a lot more modern and what people are going to be used to if you're using DAWs like Logic and Ableton. There's some real cool random features here where you can sort of dial in random steps and it sort of knows what you want to do. So yeah, but that's for the next one. For now, thanks for watching. Yeah, stay tuned for the next one.